The awakening soil. The red sun of Aerodani Delta hung low on the horizon like a wounded eye, casting long shadows across Jon Howie's modest farm. For 7 years, he had worked this forgotten patch of land beyond the mapped sectors, where corporate miners and terraforming crews had never bothered to venture. The soil here was different, richer, darker, almost alive beneath his calloused hands. Jon knelt in the field, planting the last row of xanthe berries before nightfall. The earth felt unusually warm today, pulsing gently against his palms like a sleeping creature's breath. He had always attributed the land's fertility to luck, never questioning why his crops thrived where others failed, why the rain came exactly when needed, why storms seemed to part around his small homestead. As he pressed the final seeds into the soil, something changed. The ground beneath him pulsed, once, deep and slow, like a massive heart stirring from ancient slumber. Jon jerked his hands back, breath catching in his throat. The sensation rippled outward through the field, causing the planted rows to sway without wind. "What the hell?" he whispered, staring at his dirt-stained palms. The air grew thick and heavy. In the distance, his weathered farmhouse stood silhouetted against the dying light, its windows glowing warmly with the promise of dinner and rest. But as Jon gathered his tools, ready to retreat to familiar safety, a sound stopped him cold. A low, grinding rumble rose from deep within the earth itself, growing louder until it vibrated through his bones. The sound was ancient, primal, like the planet itself was clearing its throat after millennia of silence. That's when he saw them. 2 massive shapes emerged from the dark tree-line at the field's edge. At first glance, they appeared to be wolves, but these creatures defied every story Jon had ever heard about Earth's predators. They stood nearly 4 feet at the shoulder, their fur shimmering with an otherworldly quality that caught starlight and held it. One had eyes like burning gold, while the other's gaze was deep ocean blue. They moved with deliberate grace, their massive paws sinking into the soil Jon had tended for years. No snarls, no threatening postures, just an intelligence so sharp and alien that it made his skin crawl. They circled him slowly, methodically, like hunters who had already decided the outcome of the chase. Jon's hand instinctively moved toward the plasma cutter on his belt, but something in their demeanor stopped him. These weren't predators stalking prey. They were, evaluating him. The larger wolf, dark-furred with shoulders like granite, lowered his massive head and sniffed the disturbed earth. When he looked up, his golden eyes held an ancient sadness that made Jon's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. The smaller wolf, silver threading through her midnight coat, stepped closer. Her blue eyes studied him with an intensity that seemed to peer directly into his soul. Then, impossibly, she spoke, not with sound, but directly into his mind. "You walk where you should not." The male's voice followed, deeper and more resonant. "You tend a graveyard, human." Jon staggered backward, his rational mind reeling. This isn't possible," he stammered aloud. The ground pulsed again, stronger this time. Across the field, tiny fissures appeared in the soil, glowing with an eerie blue light that traced patterns too complex and beautiful to be natural. The xanthe berry plants he had just planted began to bow low, as if offering reverence to something stirring far below. The silver wolf stepped forward, her mental voice carrying what sounded almost like pity. "This land remembers. And it has recognized you." As she spoke, the blue light grew brighter, weaving together into symbols and spirals that hurt to look at directly. From the largest cracks, shapes began to emerge, not rocks or roots, but structures of crystal and stone, ancient and impossibly elegant, pulling themselves up through the dirt like drowning survivors clawing toward air. Jon watched in stunned silence as his simple farm transformed into something from a fever dream. The wolves flanked him now, no longer threats but sentinels, their presence somehow comforting despite their otherworldly nature. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The dark wolf raised his great head, golden eyes reflecting the strange light. "The first seal is breaking. What was buried seeks the surface once more." As if responding to his words, the ground beneath Jon's feet gave one final, tremendous pulse. Somewhere in the distance, something vast and ancient stirred in its slumber, and Jon realized his quiet life as a frontier farmer had just come to an end. Guardians of the Ancient. The crystal structures continued their slow emergence from the earth throughout the night, casting ethereal shadows across Jon's transformed farm. By dawn, what had once been orderly rows of crops now resembled an alien archaeological site, complete with towering spires of translucent stone covered in glowing symbols. Jon sat on his porch, watching the impossible scene unfold while the two wolves maintained their vigil at the field's edge. The larger wolf, dark and imposing, had positioned himself on a small rise, while his silver companion prowled the perimeter with restless energy. "I suppose I should know your names," Jon called out, surprised at how quickly he'd accepted their telepathic presence. The silver wolf paused, her blue eyes meeting his across the distance. "I am Lyra," her voice resonated in his mind, "and my companion is Corin. We are the last guardians of this place." Corin's deeper mental voice rumbled with the weight of ages. "For 1,000 years, we have kept watch over what sleeps below. Your care for this land has awakened what we hoped would slumber forever." Jon stood up, walking to the edge of his porch. "What exactly are you guarding?" Lyra approached, her massive form moving with surprising grace. "Long ago, before we wore these shapes, we were something else entirely. We were the Luvener, keepers of memory, singers of the deep songs, guardians of knowledge too dangerous for most minds to contain." The crystal towers pulsed in response to her words, their light shifting from blue to a deep, ominous purple. Corin lifted his head, nostrils flaring. "Show him," he commanded. Lyra's eyes began to glow with an inner light, and suddenly Jon's vision filled with images that weren't his own. He saw a vast civilization of beings that defied description, tall, elegant creatures with silver skin and multiple sets of arms, their cities built from living crystal that sang with harmonious frequencies. They had mastered technologies that seemed like magic, time manipulation, consciousness transfer, reality alteration on a cosmic scale. But with great power came great corruption. Jon watched in horror as the Luvener civilization tore itself apart, their advanced knowledge weaponized into tools of unimaginable destruction. Entire star systems burned as they fought wars not just across space, but across time itself, unraveling the fabric of existence. "We were not warriors," Lyra's voice was heavy with ancient sorrow. "We were scholars, artists, dreamers. But even dreamers can create nightmares." The vision shifted, showing the final desperate act of the surviving Luvener. Rather than let their most dangerous knowledge fall into the wrong hands, they chose to bury it, literally and metaphysically. They found barren worlds like Aerodani Delta and used their reality-shaping abilities to hide their secrets beneath layers of earth and time, sealing them with powerful binding spells. "And we volunteered to become the guardians," Corin continued. "We bound ourselves to these forms, to this place, sacrificing our original bodies to ensure that what lies beneath would never again threaten the galaxy." Jon staggered as the visions faded, leaving him with a profound sense of loss for a civilization he'd never known. "But I'm just a farmer," he protested. "I didn't mean to wake anything up." Lyra's expression softened. "Your intentions were pure. That is precisely why the seals responded to you. This land has been waiting for someone who would care for it without seeking to exploit it." One of the crystal towers suddenly flared with brilliant light, and the ground began to shake. From its base, a doorway slowly ground open, revealing a corridor that descended into impossible depths. Ancient symbols crawled along the walls like living things, and a sound like distant singing drifted up from below. "The first seal is fully broken," Corin announced grimly. "Something stirs in the deepest chamber." Jon felt drawn toward the opening, as if invisible threads were pulling him forward. "What's down there?" "The heart of Yixtar," Lyra whispered, and even her mental voice trembled. "The collective consciousness of our people, preserved in crystalline form. It contains every memory, every thought, every dream of the Luvener civilization. And every nightmare," Corin added darkly. As if summoned by their words, a pulse of psychic energy erupted from the crystal doorway. Jon gasped as alien thoughts briefly touched his mind, vast, ancient, and utterly inhuman. For a moment, he felt the weight of 1,000 lifetimes, the sorrow of a dying race, and beneath it all, a growing hunger for the world above. The wolves flanked him protectively as the psychic wave subsided. "It knows you're here," Lyra said. "The heart has been dreaming for centuries, and now it dreams of freedom." Jon looked at the crystal passage, then at his modest farmhouse, then at the wolves who had appointed themselves his guardians. The quiet life he'd built was gone, replaced by a responsibility he never asked for but couldn't abandon. "What happens if I go down there?" he asked. Corrin's golden eyes reflected the tower's eerie light. "You become the bridge between what was and what might be. The heart will offer you power beyond imagination, knowledge that could reshape civilizations. But it will also test you in ways that have broken stronger minds than yours. The choice is yours," Lyra added gently. "But know this, if you walk away now, the seals will eventually fail on their own. What emerges then will have no connection to human compassion or wisdom." Jon stared into the crystal depths, feeling the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. Somewhere far below, something ancient and powerful waited for his decision, and the fate of more than just his small farm hung in the balance. The buried Sanctum. Jon took his first step into the crystal passage as dawn broke over Aerodani Delta. The walls pulsed with soft bioluminescence, responding to his presence like a living thing. Behind him, Lyra and Corrin followed, their massive forms somehow moving silently despite their size. The corridor spiraled downward in a perfect helix, defying the laws of physics Jon thought he understood. The walls were covered in flowing script that seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at it, as if the language itself was alive and evolving. The Luvener called this the memory spiral, Lyra explained as they descended. Each symbol records not just words, but the emotions and intentions behind them. Your mind is already beginning to adapt to process their meaning. Jon paused, realizing she was right. Without conscious effort, he was starting to understand fragments of the alien writing. One passage spoke of stellar cartography techniques that could map the gravitational signatures of entire galaxies. Another detailed emotional resonance patterns that could heal psychological trauma across species barriers. Knowledge earned through suffering, Corrin's mental voice carried deep regret. We learn these things through trial and error, often at the cost of entire worlds. As they descended deeper, the passages opened into vast chambers carved from living crystal. Impossible geometries created spaces that seemed far larger on the inside than the outside, filled with floating platforms and organic-looking technology that hummed with dormant power. Jon stopped at one chamber where thousands of crystal matrices hung suspended in the air, each one containing what looked like swirling galaxies of light. "What are those?" "Memory cores," Lyra replied. "Each one contains the complete life experience of a Luvener individual. Their knowledge, their personality, their dreams, all preserved in crystalline form." The implications hit Jon like a physical blow. "They're alive. All of them. In a fashion. They dream eternal dreams, sharing their experiences with each other across the quantum lattices. It was meant to be a form of immortality, but immortality without growth becomes a prison," Corrin finished darkly. They continued downward, passing chambers filled with incomprehensible machinery and artwork that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Jon's mind reeled as he tried to process the scope of what he was seeing. This wasn't just an alien civilization, it was an entire universe of knowledge and experience, buried beneath his simple farm. Finally, they reached the bottom of the spiral. A massive circular chamber opened before them, its domed ceiling lost in shadows. At the center stood a pillar of pure crystalline energy, pulsing with a rhythm that matched Jon's heartbeat. Around it, concentric circles of smaller crystals created a mandala pattern that hurt to look at directly. "The heart of Yixtar," Lyra whispered reverently. The central pillar flared with brilliant light as they approached, and Jon felt a presence touch his mind, vast, ancient, and utterly alien. But unlike the wolves' focused telepathic communication, this was more like being caught in a storm of pure consciousness. "Farmer of the surface soil," a voice spoke that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You have awakened us from dreams of sorrow. Why do you tend our grave?" Jon struggled to form coherent thoughts under the weight of that attention. I didn't know this was a grave. I was just trying to grow crops, to make a living." The heart's presence shifted, and Jon felt it sifting through his memories with the casual thoroughness of someone flipping through a book. Every moment of his 7 years on the farm played out before the alien consciousness, his careful tending of the soil, his quiet satisfaction at successful harvests, his genuine love for the land itself. Curious. You ask nothing of the earth except the privilege to care for it. When did humans learn such wisdom? Most of us haven't, Jon admitted. I just needed to find somewhere quiet. Somewhere I could be useful without causing harm. The heart pulsed brighter, and the surrounding crystals began to resonate in harmony. Jon felt a profound shift in the presence examining him, like a massive machine changing gears. 700 years we have waited for one such as you. The Guardians chose their forms well. They knew that when the time came, it would not be a conqueror or a scholar who would stand here, but a gardener. Lyra stepped forward. The heart speaks truth. We have sensed for decades that the seals were weakening. If someone with darker intentions had found this place first, the galaxy would burn again, Corrin added grimly. Indeed. But you, Farmer Jon Howie, present us with an opportunity we had not considered. Will you accept the burden of knowledge? Will you become the bridge between our ancient wisdom and your young species' future? Jon felt the weight of the offer settling over him. Around the chamber, the crystal matrices began to glow more brightly, and he could sense the thousands of Luvener consciousnesses stirring from their eternal dreams, all focusing their attention on his decision. What would that mean, exactly, he asked. To carry our knowledge forward, but tempered by your wisdom. To ensure that the mistakes we made are not repeated. To become a teacher, a guide, a guardian of what should and should not be shared. The heart showed him visions of possible futures, technologies that could heal dying worlds, techniques for peaceful communication between species, methods for exploring the universe without destroying it. But it also showed him the darker possibilities, the same knowledge twisted into weapons, the same techniques used for domination and control. The choice is yours, Gardener. But know this, whether you accept or refuse, the seals will not hold much longer. Others will come, drawn by the psychic resonance of our awakening. The question is whether they will find a guardian or a treasure vault. Jon looked at Lyra and Corrin, their ancient eyes filled with hope and fear in equal measure. He thought of his simple farm, of the quiet life he'd built, of the responsibility now being placed in his hands. But most of all, he thought of the soil, how it had pulsed beneath his hands like a living heart, how it had responded to his care with impossible abundance. The land had chosen him long before he'd understood what that meant. I accept, he said quietly. The heart of Yixtar blazed with light that filled the chamber, and Jon felt the combined knowledge of an entire civilization begin to flow into his mind. But instead of the overwhelming flood he expected, it came as gentle streams, organized and careful, like a master gardener planting seeds in fertile soil. As the transformation began, Jon realized that his quiet days as a simple farmer were truly over. What he would become next, he couldn't yet imagine. Choice of destiny. The knowledge transfer took 3 days. Jon emerged from the crystal chamber fundamentally changed, his mind now housing concepts and understanding that spanned millennia. The Luvener memories hadn't replaced his own, instead, they had woven themselves into his consciousness like threads in a tapestry, creating something entirely new. Lyra and Corrin watched him carefully as he sat on his farmhouse porch, adjusting to his transformation. The crystal towers had stabilized, no longer growing but maintaining their ethereal glow. The symbols on their surfaces now made perfect sense to him, telling the story of a civilization's rise and fall in luminous script. How do you feel? Lyra asked, her mental voice gentle with concern. Jon flexed his fingers, feeling the strange new awareness that flowed through him. He could sense the quantum fluctuations in the crystal towers, feel the deep currents of energy that ran through Aerodani Delta's core, even perceive the subtle psychic emanations of his wolf companions. But underneath it all, he was still fundamentally himself. Different, but still me, he replied. The heart was careful. It didn't try to overwhelm who I am, it just added to it. Corrin approached, his golden eyes studying Jon intently. And what do you see with these new eyes? Jon gazed across his transformed land, perceiving layers of reality he'd never imagined. The farm sat at the intersection of several dimensional fold points, making it a natural nexus for psychic energy. The soil's unusual fertility came from trace elements that had been quantum-locked by Luvener technology, slowly releasing their properties over centuries. Even the timing of his arrival hadn't been coincidence, the heart had been subtly influencing local conditions, preparing for this moment. I see why you chose this place, Jon said quietly. And I see that our time is running out. High above, barely visible against the alien sky, he could perceive the approach of several spacecraft. Their psychic signatures were harsh and acquisitive, military vessels and corporate research ships, drawn by the energy signature of the awakening heart. They'll be here within hours, Jon continued, standing and brushing dirt from his work clothes. And they won't be interested in preserving what's here. Lyra's fur bristled with tension. The Terran Colonial Authority has been monitoring energy anomalies across this sector. A manifestation of this magnitude would trigger every alarm they have. Along with half a dozen corporate mining consortiums and at least 2 illegal research groups, Corrin added grimly. They'll tear this place apart looking for exploitable technology. Jon felt the weight of the Luvener knowledge pressing against his consciousness. Among the countless memories and concepts the heart had shared with him, one stood out with crystal clarity, the pattern that had led to their civilization's downfall. It always began the same way, powerful knowledge falling into the hands of those who saw it only as a tool for personal gain. The heart showed me what happens next, Jon said, his voice heavy with certainty. If we let them take what's here, if we let them study and reverse engineer Luvener technology without understanding the wisdom behind it, they'll repeat every mistake your people made. The galaxy will burn. But if we destroy everything, Lyra pointed out, the knowledge dies with us. All the good that could come from it, the healing techniques, the environmental restoration methods, the consciousness bridge technologies, lost forever. Jon walked to the nearest crystal tower and placed his palm against its surface. The structure responded immediately, its glow shifting to match his heartbeat. Through his connection to the heart, he could feel the vast network of preserved Luvener consciousness stirring, waiting for his decision. There's a third option, he said slowly. Something the heart has been considering since the moment I accepted its gift. The tower pulsed brighter, and suddenly Lyra and Corrin could sense what Jon was contemplating. Their mental voices rose in alarm. Absolutely not, Lyra said firmly. The risks are enormous. The last time this was attempted, it destroyed 3 star systems, Corrin added. Jon smiled grimly. But it's never been attempted by someone with both Luvener knowledge and human perspective. The heart believes the combination might make it possible. What Jon was proposing was a technique called the Grand Dissolution, a way to scatter the concentrated knowledge of the heart across the galaxy in a form that would only activate when encountered by minds ready to use it wisely. Instead of keeping the power concentrated in one place where it could be stolen or misused, it would become part of the cosmic background, waiting for the right individuals to discover it naturally. It would require sacrificing the physical crystals, Jon explained, and most of the consciousness matrices. But the essential knowledge would survive, distributed safely across space and time. The approaching ships were close enough now that he could make out their individual energy signatures. Military destroyers, corporate research vessels, and at least one ship that radiated the cold hunger of technology pirates. They would arrive within the hour, and when they did, this peaceful corner of Aerodani Delta would become a battlefield. You're talking about dying for this, Lyra said softly. Jon considered that. The grand dissolution would require him to act as a living conduit for the entire heart's energy output. No purely biological organism could survive the process. But the Luvener knowledge in his mind suggested possibilities, ways to transfer consciousness, to preserve the essential self even as the physical form was sacrificed. Maybe, he said. Or maybe I'm talking about becoming something new. The first ships appeared on the horizon, their hull signatures broadcasting authority and greed in equal measure. Jon could sense their scanners already probing the crystal formations, their commanders making plans for extraction and exploitation. Time was up. The choice had to be made now. Jon closed his eyes and reached out to the heart of Yixtar, feeling the vast consciousness respond to his touch. Around him, the crystal towers began to resonate in harmony, building toward a crescendo that would either save the galaxy from repeating ancient mistakes or destroy everything they had worked to preserve. "Are you ready?" he asked Lyra and Corrin. The wolves moved to flank him, their ancient loyalty overriding their fears. "We have waited 1,000 years for this moment," Corrin replied. "We are ready to see it through to the end." Above them, the first corporate lander began its descent toward the farm, and Jon Howie prepared to make the most important decision in galactic history. The final confrontation. The corporate lander touched down at the edge of Jon's property with the subtle arrogance of those accustomed to taking what they wanted. 6 more ships circled overhead, their sensors focused on the crystal towers that pulsed with impossible energy. Jon could feel their greed like a physical pressure against his expanded consciousness. "Attention, unauthorized settlement," an amplified voice echoed across the farmland. "You are occupying a site of significant xenoarchaeological importance. Evacuate immediately or face forcible removal." Jon stepped forward from between the crystal towers, Lyra and Corrin flanking him like living shadows. The sight of the massive wolves gave the approaching corporate security team pause, their weapons shifting uncertainly between targets. The team leader, a woman in expensive tactical armor bearing the logo of Meridian Industries, raised her scanner and frowned at the readings. "Sir, these energy signatures don't match any known technology. We're looking at something completely unprecedented here." "All the more reason to secure it quickly," came the reply from her ship's commander. "Corporate has already filed salvage claims with 3 different colonial authorities. Get those artifacts loaded and contained before the military boys decide they want a piece." Jon felt the heart of Yixtar stirring deep below, its vast consciousness pressing against the barriers between dimensions. The approaching soldiers had no idea they were walking towards something that could reshape the fundamental nature of reality itself. "You need to leave," Jon called out, his voice carrying harmonics that made the soldiers' scanning equipment whine in protest. "This isn't a treasure vault. It's a memorial." The team leader laughed harshly. "Sir, I've got 1 man and 2 animals guarding tech that's reading off our scales. Whatever this is, it's worth more than this entire sector. Stand down or be removed." That's when the first ship above them exploded. The military destroyer that had been maintaining a high orbit suddenly bloomed into a flower of fire and debris, its hull cracking like an eggshell. Through his enhanced perception, Jon could see what the ship's crew couldn't. They had tried to take a sample of the crystal energy using their cutting beams, and the resultant feedback had overloaded their entire power grid. "Warning shot," Jon said grimly as burning wreckage began to rain down around them. The crystals don't like being touched by those with hostile intent. The team leader was shouting into her comm, trying to coordinate with the other ships, but Jon could already see the pattern forming. Each vessel that attempted to actively scan or sample the crystal towers began experiencing systematic failures. Their technology simply wasn't compatible with Luvener energy matrices, and forced interaction resulted in catastrophic overloads. "Sir, we're losing ships up there," the team leader reported, her professional comm cracking. "Whatever that energy is, it's actively hostile to our systems." "Then we take it the old-fashioned way," her commander replied. "Secure the man. He's obviously the key to controlling the tech." As the soldiers advanced, Jon felt the moment of decision crystallize around him. The grand dissolution was ready, he could feel the technique forming in his mind like a complex mathematical equation waiting to be solved. But it would require perfect timing and absolute commitment. "Lyra, Corin," he said softly, "it's time." The wolves stepped forward, their forms beginning to shimmer with the same energy that flowed through the crystal towers. As they moved, their shapes began to change, giving way to something more fundamental, pure consciousness taking material form. "What the hell?" the team leader began, but her words were cut off as Lyra and Corin revealed their true nature. They expanded, their wolf forms dissolving into beings of living light and shadow, their original Luvener consciousness finally free to manifest without the constraints of flesh. They were beautiful and terrible, ancient beyond measure, carrying the weight of a civilization's dreams and regrets. The soldiers fell back in terror, their weapons useless against beings that existed more as concept than matter. In the sky above, the remaining ships began to retreat as their sensors registered energy readings that broke every known scale. "Now, Jon," Lyra's voice resonated through every crystal in the field. "While they are afraid and confused. While their minds are open to wonder instead of greed." Jon nodded and placed both hands on the central crystal tower. The heart of Yixtar responded immediately, pouring its accumulated consciousness into his transformed mind. The sensation was like trying to contain an ocean in a teacup, but the careful preparation paid off. Instead of being destroyed by the energy flow, Jon became a conduit for it. The grand dissolution began. Every crystal in the field began to sing, their harmonies weaving together into a song that transcended sound and entered the realm of pure meaning. The accumulated knowledge and wisdom of the Luvener civilization began to flow outward, not as raw data but as carefully crafted seeds of understanding. Jon felt his consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of his physical form, touching the quantum foam that underlied reality itself. Through his connection to the heart, he scattered the essence of Luvener wisdom across the galaxy, not as power to be seized, but as inspiration to be earned. A meditation technique that could heal psychological trauma found its way into the dreams of a therapist on Rigel 7. The principles of ecological restoration embedded themselves in the research notes of a terraforming engineer near the galactic core. A method for peaceful first contact with alien species whispered itself to a diplomatic scout on the outer rim. Thousands of seeds of knowledge, each one carefully placed where it could do the most good, spreading through the galaxy like spores on a cosmic wind. The wisdom would only fully activate when encountered by minds ready to use it responsibly, ensuring that the Luvener mistakes would not be repeated. But the process came at a cost. Jon felt his physical form beginning to dissolve, his consciousness spreading too thin to maintain coherent existence. The soldiers and their retreating ships became distant concerns as his awareness touched star systems he had never seen. "Jon." Lyra's voice cut through the cosmic dissolution, anchoring him to his sense of self. "You don't have to sacrifice everything. The heart has shown us another way." Through their shared connection, Jon felt what she meant. The grand dissolution didn't require his complete destruction, it required transformation. Instead of scattering his consciousness to the void, he could become something new, a living bridge between the ancient wisdom and the evolving galaxy. With careful precision, Jon pulled his expanding awareness back toward its center, using the techniques the heart had taught him to compress his scattered consciousness into a new form. His physical body dissolved completely, but something else took its place, a being of crystalline light, humanoid in shape but clearly no longer purely human. The transformation completed just as the last of the Luvener knowledge found its destinations across the galaxy. The crystal towers around the farm began to fade, their purpose fulfilled, dissolving into streams of harmless light that dissipated into the atmosphere. The corporate soldiers stared in stunned silence as the impossible energies finally stabilized. Where Jon Howie had stood moments before, a figure of living crystal now waited, its faceted surface reflecting the light of Aerodani Delta's red sun. "The knowledge is safe," Jon said, his voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to come from the planet itself. "Scattered where it can grow naturally, free from exploitation or misuse." The team leader lowered her weapon, her scanner readings now showing nothing more than trace mineral deposits where the crystal towers had stood. "Sir, the energy signatures are gone. Whatever was here, it's inactive now. In the sky above, the remaining corporate and military ships began to depart, their sensors detecting nothing of value worth the risk of further losses. The treasure they had come to claim had transformed itself into something far more valuable but infinitely less tangible, wisdom that would spread across the galaxy at its own pace, in its own time. Lyra and Corrin had resumed their wolf forms, but Jon could see their true nature now, the ancient Luvener consciousness choosing to remain as guardians, even in this transformed world. "Our watch is not yet over," Corrin explained as the last of the ships disappeared into the star-filled sky. "There will be others who come seeking power. We will be here to ensure they find only empty fields and old stories." "And you?" Lyra asked Jon. "What will you do now?" Jon looked at his transformed hands, then at the farmland that had started this incredible journey. The soil was still rich and dark, still pulsing with subtle life. His farmhouse stood unchanged on its small rise, waiting for someone to call it home. "I think I'll keep farming," he said with a smile that carried the wisdom of ages. "The galaxy will need gardeners more than conquerors in the years to come. And there's still good soil here that deserves tending." As the red sun set over Aerodani Delta, Jon Howie, transformed but not destroyed, evolved but still fundamentally himself, walked back toward his farmhouse. Behind him, Lyra and Corrin settled into their eternal watch, guardians of a secret that was no longer a secret but had become something far more powerful, a promise of wisdom waiting to bloom wherever it was most needed. The first seeds of Luvener knowledge had already begun to germinate across the galaxy, touching minds ready to receive them. Healers, artists, scientists, and dreamers would find inspiration in their work, never knowing its true source but carrying forward the hard-won wisdom of a civilization that had learned from its mistakes. And on a small farm on a forgotten world, a man who was no longer quite human continued to tend his soil, knowing that the greatest harvests often came from the smallest seeds, planted with patience and care in ground prepared by love. In the distance, the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, each one a potential home for the scattered wisdom now making its way across the cosmos. Jon smiled and headed inside to prepare dinner, content in the knowledge that his quiet work would continue to matter, even in ways he might never fully understand. The galaxy was a little wiser now, and that was enough. The end.